So today I want to talk about why you would buy a commercial investment instead of a house or a rental through a residential outlet. So there's a lot of pre-existing notions in society that it's too expensive to buy a commercial property. It's more complex. It's more, of an endeavor than just buying a residential house and renting it to someone or buying a duplex or starting your path through that, like a Bigger Pockets or one of the other residential recommendations that you would get from any other outlet. So, first off, I want to say that it's not more expensive to buy a commercial property in the context of purchase price versus possible income generation. I would argue that it is more expensive when it's in reference to a down payment because the down payment is going to be slightly higher than if you were to buy a house. You could buy one and um, buy it like you're going to own or occupy it and then live there for a little bit and then rent it out or house hack it. Um, but I would also argue that it's more expensive to own over the course of time because the tenant and the renovations could be higher than what's acceptable in a similar commercial investment. So, like, let's say, for example, you have an idea that you want to buy something for $300,000. And that $300,000 gets you a single family house in a nice area or a decent area of our country. And in that same area, you might buy a commercial office building for $300,000 that's quite small. But when I say quite small, I would say quite small in relation to what everybody thinks of when they think of a commercial office building. I think that it is probably going to be bigger than the house per square foot or square footage of the home you buy, very possibly, or very similar to. Um, the other thing that I would argue is that when you need to fix it, so like let's say the building you buy for $300,000 is a commercial office building and it has standard commercial carpet and drywall walls and it has drop acoustic tile ceiling and maybe it's 3,000 square feet and it has maybe two units in it or what they call two units, but each one of those units has five offices. So you have like 10 offices you buy, 10 individual offices, 10 rooms with common area hallways and restrooms and things. Versus that residential property that has, three bed, one and a half bath or whatever it might be, 2,500 square feet. And you're going to rent it to a single, tenant. And let's say they rent it from you for like $2,500 a month, which is probably higher than what you could expect for a $300,000 house, roughly, unless you're in a really nice area. But that same office building that has 10 offices, the equivalent of the $2,500 would be renting each one of those offices for $250. So instead of having one tenant that rents the house for $2,500, you have 10 people that rent single offices for $250, which if they're a standard 100 square foot office, which they might be larger than that, or I would say that in my market or based on my experience, people will rent single offices for more than that. Um, and you'd have 10 tenants instead of one. And if one were to leave, you'd have nine more and you'd still be paying, all of your bills and you could lose like 30% of them. If you have like one residential tenant, there's no like middle ground of, I lost some tenancy. It's like all or nothing. And I think that that's a key factor when you're starting is you lose everybody when you lose somebody if you're renting, a single residential apartment or a single house versus in a commercial investment, you could lose a number of tenants if you're renting out smaller spaces for business purposes. You could also make more because I think it's realistic that you could rent, the 10 offices, at $300 to $500 a month each. That's what I've done. That's what, I don't live in the great, I don't invest in the best areas. And it's very common that someone just needs a single office and they don't want to work from home anymore. And that they're willing to pay a rent of, 450 to, 750 for just a single office, depending on the size of it and the location that you're in and how close it is to their house or whatever it might be. So, those 10 offices, I would say range like $2,500 a month to, 5,000 a month, where like a residential, um, property, you're really like, there's going to be a lot of competition in the market. I would assume there's going to be less competition for that office building. And then, when people look, they don't really have a huge comparison of what they should be paying for spaces because they don't live in a house and they're not renting a house. They didn't rent one before and they're looking to upgrade. Like they might just want a single office and they're like, whatever one comes first, and if they can afford it, they'll pay for it. It's more of a price point that they're looking for than it is, what they can get for that, money in, other offices or other options they have. So I think that's, in my experience, something that is, is a big difference. I would say that I dare you all to look into, considering a commercial property over a residential property for the pure fact that just the educational process of looking into it, um, it might seem more daunting, but I think that it has way more potential and it also has way less repair costs. So like I was saying, you'd have commercial carpet floors and drop acoustic tile ceilings, where in that residential property, um, you might have like a dated kitchen and bathrooms that are dated, and that's like a big factor for those types of people that are renting in most part, I would think. Versus like a lot of like your offices, if they have some older carpet, like people will just throw a throw rug down and the carpet will last for a long time. And like as long as it's not super holy, and like disgusting, like people won't really need it changed or even ask you to change. And when they come in, they'll be painting like you know, a 10 by 10 room with white paint if they decide to, or depending on their use. And it's really going to be way less capital intensive for you as a owner to keep the space in a rentable condition, or at least a condition that has average demand for that space, compared to a residential property where I feel like I'd have to be updating a bathroom or a kitchen, or even like if I get a bad tenant and you know, they have dogs and pets and they ruin the space because they're angry that they're going to leave. Like that's not really a thing that happens in commercial for the most part. Like if someone's not going to want to stay, it's going to be because their business grew or it shrank and they're not, you know, physically living there. So it's not like they're not like morally attached to the fact that they're losing their place to sleep. And I think that also lends itself to less conflict and less issues for you as a landlord. You also don't get the calls like, hey, my light bulb went out or something, and I need you to come look at it, because I need lights in my house and it's Saturday at 10 o'clock at night, and I want to watch TV and the power's not working or something, and like the breaker tripped or something, like they need to replace a light bulb and that's all it was. Your commercial tenants won't really be that type of client, and they also won't be there all the time, so your utilities will be lower. They'll be there from 9 to 5, and they won't be able to control the heat. And I know that in a residential property, they'll be paying the utilities. Um, but like you take that into consideration when you put out the lease. So like, $2,500 to you might be more in a residential property in some aspects because you aren't paying utilities, versus $2,500 in a commercial property where you have multiple tenants and you are paying utilities. But that type of property, utilities aren't going to be very expensive. And I would almost guarantee that you'll be able to get that plus some. in the rental income that you get from the property. So I guess to conclude, I would say don't just think about buying residential, think about buying commercial too. I would be happy to help you understand it because it's really not that complex if you start small. And I think that starting small in commercial, you will grow faster and you'll appreciate faster than if you start small with a residential property. Today, I'm going into the property and getting keys to a tenant that I signed a lease with over the weekend. I added $750 to my income statement. That's $750 times 12. Let's say times 10, just to make it easy for you guys, is $7,500 at a 10 capitalization rate, which is a multiplier of 10, which is very inexpensive in the commercial world. Would be $75,000. So just from one $750 lease, I am increasing my property's value roughly $75,000. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how that works to start and how easy it is to get a space. And that tenant is paying me $750 and is sharing a small space to put some tools and to park a car to pop out dents with paintless dent removal in a small warehouse. And they're not the only tenant in that warehouse; they're sharing it. So that space costed me very little to buy per square foot, but now it's worth quite a bit to the next investor because the potential of getting that money every month is what they're really buying, not so much the building. Well, have a great day, and I look forward to keeping in touch with everybody. Please take a look at the links below. You'll see a quick notebook for evaluating properties. That's what I do and I use when I'm in the process of trying to identify my next property and making offers. And then you'll also see my Patreon. I'd really appreciate any support in the future. I want to keep growing this channel. Thank you.